"Can you take her instead of me?" asked the little girl. The rancher said nothing, then took both. Texas, 1870, border livestock market. The sun blistered overhead, baking the dust into fine grit that stuck to every breath. Wooden pens creaked beneath the weight of cattle, hogs, and, farther out, in the shadowed fringe of the market, people. They were women, most of them immigrants, bound at the wrists and ankles, some too weak to sit upright. Ragged dresses, faces hollowed by heat and hunger. No one bid on them, not anymore. Those left too long in the slave pens were deemed unsellable, the kind that traffickers would clear out after sundown. Ryland moved past them without slowing. He wore a wide-brimmed hat low over sun-dark hair, his face shaded, unreadable. 37, tall, hard-framed, with calloused hands and a limp in his right step, a gift from a horse that hadn't survived the same storm his family didn't either. He'd buried his wife 5 winters ago, their daughter, Clara, 2 months after. Since then, Bo lived alone, running cattle and outriding memories. He didn't look toward the pens. He didn't need reminders of how ugly this world had gotten. He had only come for horse medicine. But then something tugged at his coat. A small hand, dirty fingers, brown eyes too wide for a face so small. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old. "You don't have to take me," she whispered, voice trembling in broken English. "Just take my mama." Turned his head. The girl stood barefoot on the dry earth, clutching the edge of his coat with a kind of reverence. Her dress was torn, knees bruised, her face sunburnt beneath tangled strands of black hair. She pointed one tiny finger toward the shaded side of the corral. There, slumped against the post, was a woman, late 20s maybe, her skin once golden, now pale with dust and fever. Her wrists were bound with old rope, raw and bleeding. Her lip was split, her jaw bruised, one eye swollen shut. She wasn't moving. "Bit her?" Bo asked quietly. The girl nodded. She hasn't eaten. I gave her my bread, all of it. 2 days." Bo crouched slowly, knees cracking as he came level with the girl's eyes. "What's her name?" he asked. "Lena," she said. She's my mama. They said if no one buys her today, they'll take her somewhere bad." Bo looked again at the woman, Lena, barely breathing, hands tied above her head like cattle too wild to trust. He saw the swelling on her wrist, the split skin on her cheek. He saw the girl's eyes, too, a mirror of every hunger he had never known how to feed in his own daughter. "Please," she whispered again, just take her." Bo stood. He didn't speak. He walked toward the pen, where Lena lay, crumpled in the dust, her back against the splintered post, head lolled to one side. The sun-painted shadows across her chest, rising faintly with shallow breaths. The slaver sitting nearby perked up, a fly swatter tapping against his knee. "You looking to make a purchase, mister?" the man asked. Bo didn't answer. He pulled a leather pouch from his coat, tossed it on the table with a dull thud. Gold coins spilled out. "I'll take both," Bo said. The slaver's brows rose. "Both?" Bo nodded toward the child. "Girl comes too." The man leaned forward, assessing the coins. "Well now, you just bought yourself a whole mess of trouble, cowboy." Bo looked down at the unconscious woman, then at the girl still standing behind him. "I've had worse," he said. He lifted the girl gently, settling her against his side. Her arms curled around his neck without a sound. Then, as careful as handling glass, he cut Lena down from the ropes and carried her across the dust. Not a soul spoke as he passed. Not one. But somewhere in the silence, as he walked away from the pen, Rosita whispered against his collar, "Thank you for taking both." Bo didn't answer, but he held them tighter. The ride back to Bo's ranch was long and silent. Rosita sat pressed against his side on the saddle, her tiny hands clenched around his shirt. Lena lay slumped across Bo's saddle blanket behind them, tied down gently so she wouldn't fall. She hadn't stirred since he lifted her at the market. Beau's land sat beyond the hills, tucked into a fold of cottonwoods and quiet dirt. No one visited, no one passed by. That was how he liked it. Until today. He carried Lena inside the house, her weight light as a sack of grain. The old cabin still smelled of wood smoke and leather, the floor worn smooth by years of steps that no longer came. He didn't hesitate where to place her. The small bedroom, painted in pale blue, sat untouched since Clara's death. Her wooden toys still rested on the windowsill. A pair of scuffed shoes lay beneath the bed, and on the nightstand, framed in oak, was a photo of her smiling, gap-toothed arms around a lamb. Beau laid Lena on the bed gently, as if afraid the room might protest. He straightened her limbs, pulled the quilt up, then turned to the hearth. The girl, Rosita, stood quietly at the doorway, eyes wide. "She's burning," she said softly, touching her forehead. Beau nodded. "We'll get that down." He boiled water on the stove and brought out the tin of willow bark. He crushed it, mixed it with a little molasses, and coaxed Rosita to help. Together they worked. He cleaned the cuts on Lena's wrists, wrapped them in clean cloth. Her shoulder had a deep bruise, and the skin on her back was mottled from days in the sun. He dabbed salve on cracked lips, soaked a rag, and gently pressed it against her temple. Rosita took the cloth after that. She climbed onto the bed, kneeling beside her mother, and began to wipe her forehead the way Beau had shown her. "Mama," she whispered. "Mama, wake up. I'm here." Beau stepped back, leaning against the door frame. He hadn't seen this room lit by candlelight in years. Now it glowed again, with effort, with care, with the quiet hum of someone wanting to live. That night, Rosita slept curled up at the foot of the bed. Beau stayed near the doorway, dozing in a chair with his boots still on, one hand resting on the rifle, balanced across his lap. For 2 days, Lena didn't move. On the third morning, Beau was changing the cloth on her wrist when he felt her flinch. Not much, just a twitch of the fingers. Then, a groan. Her eyelids fluttered open. They were dark brown, sharp, afraid. Beau froze. "It's all right," he said quietly. "You're safe now." Lena struggled to sit up. Pain flared in her side. She gasped, her hand flying to the bruised ribs. "Don't—" Beau stepped forward, but stopped when her eyes locked on his. Feral, ready to run, even from a bed. "Where's Rosita?" she rasped, voice dry as sand. A small bundle shot forward from the corner of the room. "Mama." Rosita launched herself into the bed, wrapping her arms tight around Lena's neck. Lena gasped again, not from pain this time, but from relief. Her arms curled around the girl, holding her so tight they both trembled. Beau backed away, giving them the space they needed. In the kitchen, he sat at the table, staring down at his hands. They were nicked and dirt-stained, built for fencing and branding, not for bandages and soup ladles. But for 3 days they had done something different, and in the quiet beyond the wall he heard it. A mother's sob, a daughter's giggle. 2 sounds he hadn't heard in years. And though he would never say it aloud, something old inside him shifted. Not healed, not yet, but stirring. The sound of a scream shattered the morning quiet. Beau dropped the bucket of feed and sprinted back toward the house, boots kicking up dust. His heart pounded against his ribs like a war drum. By the time he reached the porch, the front door had already slammed open, hanging ajar like a wound. Inside, chaos reigned. Lena stood in the small bedroom, wild-made and panting, her hair a tangle across her face. A wooden hairbrush clutched in her hand like a weapon, raised high and trembling. Her chest heaved beneath the clean cotton blouse Rosita had helped her into that morning. Her wrists, though still ringed with bruises, held strength now and fury. "Stay away," she shouted, voice hoarse, thick with raw fear. "I swear to God, if you come near me—" Beau froze in the doorway. He raised both hands slowly, palms open. "It's all right," he said gently. "You're safe." But Lena didn't hear him, or couldn't. Her whole body trembled with a storm that had lived in her bones for too long. She lunged. The brush cracked against his shoulder. Again, and again. Each strike wasn't about hurting him. It was about not being helpless anymore. Her hand shook more with grief than with rage. "You bought me," she cried, voice splintering. "You think that gives you rights? That I'm yours now? Just another thing on your land?" Bo didn't flinch. He didn't defend himself. He didn't speak. When her breath finally hitched and her arm dropped with exhaustion, Bo met her gaze and said one word. "No." Then he turned and walked out. Lena collapsed to her knees, clutching the brush, shoulders shaking. It wasn't just fear that gripped her. It was shame, confusion, the crushing weight of not knowing who to trust anymore. From behind the door, a small shadow stirred. Rosita stepped into the room, barefoot, her small hands pulling at the hem of her nightdress. She walked carefully toward her mother, knelt beside her, and touched her arm with a gentleness that didn't belong to someone so young. "He sleeps on the floor," Rosita whispered. "He never touches." Lena blinked. "What?" Rosita looked toward the hallway. "He makes soup," she continued, "and he brushes my hair. But he sleeps on the floor, every night. By the door. I see him." Lena turned her head. For the first time, she noticed the folded blanket and pillow tucked near the door frame, half hidden, easy to miss. Bo had never once entered the room without knocking. She had thought it was because he didn't care. Now she realized it was because he did. She rose slowly and sat down on the edge of the bed. Her gaze drifted across the room to the small wooden table by the oil lamp. A framed photograph sat there, faded by time. A little girl with missing front teeth held a lamb in her arms, beaming like the sun. Next to it was a carefully folded blanket, embroidered at the edge in green thread. Clara. Rosita crawled up beside her and laid her head in her lap. That night, Bo brought a tray of food. Lena didn't speak, but she nodded when he set it down. He didn't linger, just nodded back and closed the door gently behind him. Rosita whispered stories about horses and skies and how Mr. Bo talks funny, but he sings to the fence when he's alone. Lena let out a laugh, soft and real, the first sound of warmth from her lips in days. When she turned off the lamp that night, she didn't lock the door. She didn't feel like she had to. The next morning, light spilled across the windowsill. Lena stood in silence, watching Bo mend the eastern fence. His sleeves were rolled, hands rough, steady. He didn't glance toward the house. No hunger in his gaze, no claim in his stance. He just a man who said he would help and kept doing it. And for the first time in years, Lena felt something unexpected move through her chest. A question, a beginning. Maybe, just maybe, not all men came to take. The sun hung high, burning over the hills when they came. 3 men rode up the long path to the ranch house. Dust kicked behind their horses like ghosts chasing them. At the front, a tall man in a leather duster dismounted first, followed by 2 others with rifles slung across their backs. Their boots struck the ground heavy and sure, like they owned the dirt. Bo saw them before they even reached the fence line. He walked out of the barn, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. He said nothing, didn't blink. The tall one smirked. "Name's Doyle. We're here on business." Bo stayed still. The man held up a stained piece of paper. "We've come to collect merchandise. Girl named Lena, property of Mr. Mercado. Got the papers right here." Bo glanced at the parchment, some crude forgery of a contract, smeared with ink and arrogance. "I bought her," Bo said flatly. "No," Doyle said, stepping closer. "You bought time. She belongs to us. Now, we ain't here to stir trouble. Just hand her over and we'll be on our way." Bo's eyes flicked toward the porch, where the curtains barely shifted. Lena was watching. Rosita clung to her skirts. He turned back to the men. "Get off my land." The second man sneered. "Or what?" Bo took another step forward. His hands were empty, but the tension in his body was a loaded gun. "I paid gold for her," he said. "Now I'll pay blood if I must." Doyle laughed. "You must think you're some kind of hero." Bo didn't respond. In one swift motion, the man behind Doyle reached for his rifle. But Bo moved faster. He spun to the right, pulled a lever hidden behind the fence post. A shotgun fell into his hands from the hollow rail he'd hollowed himself. The blast ripped through the air. The second man went down, screaming. The other two scrambled. Doyle drew and fired. Bo staggered back as the bullet tore across his upper arm. Blood bloomed against his shirt. Lena screamed. Rosita cried out from inside the house, banging on the door. Bo dropped to one knee, cocked the shotgun again, and fired at their feet. Doyle cursed, ducking behind his horse. "Next one takes your head off," Bo growled. That was all it took. They mounted fast, dragging their wounded man across the saddle, and fled into the horizon with dust in their eyes and death behind them. Bo stayed on one knee for a long breath, blood dripping through his sleeve. Then the front door burst open. Lena rushed to him, skirts trailing behind, dropping to the ground with a gasp. Her hands shook, but she pressed them to his arm, tearing the shirt away. "You're bleeding," she whispered. He grunted. "Not too bad." "You're a fool," she said, tears streaking down her cheeks. "You could have been killed." "I've been dead before," he said softly, "when I lost my daughter, but today I'm alive." She froze. Then, without a word, she pressed a cloth to the wound and wrapped his arm as best she could. Bo winced. "That stings." "You deserve worse," she said, but her voice trembled. He looked at her. "You didn't have to come out here." "I did," she replied, meeting his eyes, "because you didn't have to fight for me. But you did." Inside, Rosita clung to the doorway, watching as her mother knelt in the dust beside the man who had shed blood for her. And for the first time, Lena's hands didn't shake when she touched him. The kitchen smelled faintly of blood and boiled cloth. Bo sat shirtless at the wooden table, his right arm resting atop a folded towel, chest rising and falling with shallow, controlled breaths. The bullet had passed clean through, but the damage it left behind was far from neat. The flesh around the entry wound was swollen and red, oozing slowly with each movement. His jaw was tight, a line carved in stone. Sweat clung to his brow, but he made no sound. Lena stood beside him with a kitchen knife in one hand and a half-empty bottle of whiskey in the other. Her fingers trembled slightly as she uncorked the bottle and poured it onto a strip of cloth, then directly over the wound. The sharp scent filled the air, and the hiss of liquid meeting torn skin made Bo grunt, but he didn't flinch. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked quietly, glancing up at her with pain-clued eyes. Lena nodded. "I've seen worse," she said, though her voice betrayed the tremor of memory. She leaned closer, inspecting the injury. Blood still welled at the edges of the wound, thick and dark. "I need to cut a little," she whispered, "to clean it out." Bo looked down at the knife, then back at her. His eyes didn't hold fear, only trust. "You don't have to." "I want to," Lena said. Their eyes met, and for the first time, neither looked away. She tore a strip of linen, rolled it tight, and pressed it between his teeth. "Bite," she instructed softly. Bo obeyed. Her hands hovered for just a moment, then she lowered the blade. The edge kissed flesh. Bo's whole body tensed. A groan rumbled from his throat, muffled by the cloth, but he stayed still. He didn't jerk, didn't retreat. Lena's hands moved quickly. Her palms were slick with sweat, but her motions were precise. She cut away damaged tissue, dabbed with whiskey-soaked cloth, pressed clean gauze against the exit wound. Her fingers worked with quiet urgency, driven not by fear, but by care. When it was over, she wrapped the wound with the last of the gauze, tying it tight with firm, practiced knots. Her breath came in short gasps, the cloth in her hands soaked red. Bo leaned back in the chair, eyes shut, chest glistening with sweat. He spat the cloth into the basin and exhaled slowly. "You've done that before," he murmured. Lena was wiping her hands when she answered. "I had a brother," she said, "back in Sonora. He broke things, bones mostly. Got into fights with boys twice his size. I used to patch him up." Lou opened his eyes. Silence fell, but it was different this time. Not cold, not tense, just quiet. Lena turned and caught sight of the photo on the mantel. The same photo she'd noticed before, the little girl with the soft curls and a lamb in her lap. "She looked like Rosita," she said. Bo nodded. "Her name was June." What happened? Fever, he replied simply. Took her in 3 days. Lena's gaze softened. And your wife? Orton gone a month later, he said. Couldn't live in a house that didn't have her voice in it. Lena swallowed. Her eyes dropped to the table, to the empty space between them. Slowly, her hand rested there, open, not reaching, just waiting. She was lucky, she said. Bo frowned slightly. How do you mean? To be loved like that? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, with deliberate care, Bo reached forward and placed his hand atop hers. His fingers were rough and calloused. Hers were thinner, worn from labor, from chains. But they fit. She didn't pull away. Instead, she looked into his eyes, and for the first time since she'd been chained, since the cage, since the auction block, Lena didn't feel the weight of a man's gaze as something she needed to fear. She felt it as something soft, something human, something she wanted to return. You should rest, she whispered, her thumb brushing over his knuckles. But she didn't move, and neither did he. They just sat there, scarred, battered, stitched together not by duty but by choice, by something stronger than survival, by the beginning of trust. The late afternoon sun stretched golden fingers across the Texas plains, painting the grass in hues of honey and rust. Bo walked beside the small, spotted mare as Rosita bounced in the saddle, her little legs barely reaching the stirrups he had adjusted just for her. The horse moved slowly, gentle as the breeze, her hoofs making soft thuds in the dry dirt. Easy now, Bo said. Keep your hands steady. Rosita giggled, her fingers gripping the reins like it was the most important job in the world. Who's like this? Just like that, Bo nodded, one hand lightly on the mare's side, the other ready to catch Rosita if she slipped. You're doing better than most grown folks. Rosita's face lit up with pride. Her cheeks were flushed from the wind, her hair undone in wisps around her temples. She looked down at him, her smile still wide, then fell quiet. Something in her gaze shifted. She reached forward and wrapped her arms around Bo's neck. He caught her reflexively, lifting her from the saddle. She nestled into his chest, small hands curling into his shirt. Then she whispered, Can I call you Papa now? Bo's breath caught. He froze, arms tightening around her. The plains went silent, the breeze paused, the grass held still, even the mare turned her head, as if waiting for his answer. But Bo said nothing. His throat burned, his chest ached, in the deepest corner he thought had long gone numb. So he just held her like the question did not need words. Held her like the answer had already been yes. From the edge of the fence line, Lena watched. She had come out with a basket of fresh apples, ready to call them in for supper. But she stopped when she saw Bo lifting Rosita from the horse. The girl's arms looped around his neck. Then she heard it. Her daughter's voice, small and full of hope. Can I call you Papa now? Lena did not breathe. And when she saw Bo's silence, saw the way he just held Rosita, face buried against her wild curls, Lena felt something shift inside her. Something break, and something heal. The apples fell from her hands, forgotten in the grass. She sank to the ground, knees folding beneath her, palms pressing into the dirt. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and quiet, streaming down her cheeks. She cried for all the nights Rosita had slept afraid, for all the mornings she had woken without safety, for the months Lena had feared no man could be trusted. And now, here was this man, worn, weathered, silent, carrying her daughter as if she were made of glass and gold. Lena laughed through her tears, and cried more. That night, after Rosita had long since fallen asleep curled in the quilt Bo had brought from town, Lena stood at the doorway of his room. He sat by the window, a lantern casting flickers across his face, the bandage on his shoulder freshly changed. She stepped in without knocking, her voice soft. She asked to call you Papa. Bo turned slowly. He looked tired, but not from pain. She did, he said. I heard, Lena nodded. Silence grew between them, but not the hard kind, not the kind they used to survive. This one was gentle, waiting. She never called anyone that before, Lena whispered. Bo nodded again, his hand resting on the edge of the chair. I didn't know what to say. You didn't need to, she said, voice catching. She walked closer, knelt beside him. You brought her back to life, she said. Bo looked at her. Her hand found his. And me too, she added, barely a whisper. He did not speak. He just lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her fingertips like they were sacred. The sun hung low over the Texas horizon, warm and golden, stretching shadows over the field of bluebonnets Bo had planted long ago for no reason, until now. The wind whispered gently through the tall grass, carrying the scent of spring and something new. At the edge of the field, Bo stood by the old forge, sleeves rolled up, eyes steady on the small brass ring cooling in his palm. He had made it from the firing pin of the revolver that once saved Lena's life. It was rough, not perfect, but honest, strong, just like the woman he had made it for. When he walked back to the cabin, Lena was outside brushing Rosita's hair. Her white dress fluttered in the breeze, simple and soft. The sleeves were slightly uneven. The hem was hand-stitched with effort, not elegance, and yet it suited her more than any silk ever could. She turned when she saw him, and for a moment her breath caught. Dole approached slowly. No crowd, no preacher yet. Just the three of them, standing in a world they had somehow survived. He didn't kneel. He didn't speak for long. He just held out the ring in his calloused hand and said, voice low and steady, I lost everything. He paused, eyes not leaving hers. But you and Rosita, you gave me something to live for. Lena's hand trembled as she took the ring. Her fingers brushed his. She looked down at the brass, then at her wrist, where the scar from the rope still faintly marked her skin. Then she looked up and nodded. Yes. By late afternoon, the field was dressed in petals. Bo had asked nothing from the town, but Miss Alberta, the old seamstress, had come anyway with a bouquet of wildflowers and 2 dresses, one for the bride, one for the flower girl. A few neighbors stood at a respectful distance. Even the sheriff tipped his hat when he saw Bo's eyes and decided it was better to stay silent. Rosita skipped ahead, scattering petals from a basket nearly her size. Her curls bounced, and her joy filled the air like music. Lena walked slowly behind her daughter, holding a bouquet of prairie blossoms tied with twine. Her dress caught the sun. Her eyes were bright, her hands steady. The scar on her wrist was visible. So was the one on her collarbone. But she did not hide them. And no one dared look away. Because there was nothing shameful in survival, and she was walking proof of it. At the altar, nothing more than 2 crates and a linen sheet. Bo waited. Cleaned up in a buttoned shirt, the collar still stiff. His hair was combed for the first time in weeks. But it was his eyes that looked different, softer, lit from within. When Lena reached him, she whispered, I never dreamed I'd wear white again. Bo shook his head. You earned it, he said. The preacher said his words. Bo and Lena said theirs. The kiss was simple, sweet and slow, 2 broken things finally whole. When they turned to walk back down the petal-strewn path, Rosita ran to them and grabbed both their hands. Now we're all 3, she said, beaming. All looked at Lena. And Lena, head high, heart full, smiled through tears. Yes, mi amor, she said. All 3. The days after the wedding were slow, quiet, and full of breath. Lena began her mornings in the kitchen. She burned the eggs twice that first week, but Bo ate every bite without complaint. Rosita helped mash beans, her small hands proud with every stir. In the evenings, they sat on the porch. Bo cleaned his rifle, while Lena stitched dresses from leftover fabric. Rosita drew on scraps of paper, pictures of the 3 of them holding hands, smiling under a big yellow sun. She pinned each one on the wall beside the hearth. One night, as the fire crackled low, Lena whispered in broken English, We are family? Bo looked at her. He nodded. We are. They found a rhythm. Bo taught Rosita to saddle a pony. Lena began speaking more, mixing Spanish and English until the words stuck. She made pozole from memory one Sunday and smiled when Bo asked for seconds. At church, Lena sat beside Bo, her scarred wrist no longer hidden by sleeves. No one dared whisper now, not after what Bo had done to protect her, not after the wedding under the wildflowers. Rosita sat proudly between them, coloring quietly during the sermon. One afternoon, Lena opened a dusty trunk in the loft and found an old dress, Bo's daughter's, yellow and soft. She pressed it to her chest and wept. That evening she gave it to Rosita, who twirled in the fading light. Bo watched them from the porch, hands folded, eyes glassy. "You okay?" Lena asked softly, stepping beside him. He nodded. "I think, for the first time in a long while, yes." At night, Rosita would crawl into their bed, tuck herself between them and whisper, "I love you, Mama. I love you, Papa." And every time, Lena's eyes would blur. Not from pain, from the kind of joy that hurts when you've lived too long without it. They'd built a new fence that fall, painted the barn, repaired a broken swing. Bo carved a wooden plaque for the porch. La Casa de Esperanza, the House of Hope. Lena kissed him when he nailed it up. One crisp morning, as the first frost kissed the fields, Lena stood at the edge of the land and whispered to the wind in Spanish. A prayer of gratitude, a goodbye to fear, a welcome to whatever came next. Bo came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "You still scared?" he asked. She shook her head. Not anymore. Inside the house, on the wall above the hearth, hung the latest drawing from Rosita, a family of 3, hearts drawn over their chests. Below it, Lena had written in careful script, "Home. I was trampled, branded, sold like cattle, forgotten like dust." But he saw more. The little girl who begged him to save me, she gave me life. And the man who stayed quiet when others shouted, he gave me a future. Now I see it too. I am not owned. I am not broken. I am loved. I am home. If this story made your heart ache and heal, if you felt the silent strength of Bo Rylan, the fierce love of little Rosita, and the quiet rebirth of Lena, then you are exactly why we tell these stories. At Wild West Love Stories, we believe in romance forged through fire, in families built not by blood but by choice. In the dusty corners of the American frontier, love still finds its way. Subscribe now to never miss a tale of redemption, resilience, and the kind of love that rides through storms and stays. Because real love does not always come with flowers. It comes with grit, grace, and someone willing to stand beside you. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories, where dust settles, but hearts don't.